This just happened the night before last. For the past 3 days, my husband, my 2 little girls of preschool age, my mother-in-law and I had been camping at beachside campgrounds in Oregon, a beautiful place caught between Highway 101 and the beach itself, just north of Yahutz. Anyway, that night was our last night there, and somewhere in the middle of sleeping, my youngest daughter woke up crying, saying that she was scared. Not overly unusual for a preschooler, but after I tucked her back in, she dropped right back into a deep sleep, which for her is very unusual. She usually likes to snuggle and talk, and generally keep me up as long as she can. As I was trying to get back to sleep myself, I heard what I thought was my older daughter saying, "Mommy, Mommy." I answered her, but had no response. I heard the voice again, this time more insistent, "Mommy, Mommy," though always at a kind of a whisper. I got up and physically looked at my 2 girls, who were completely sound asleep, the kind of sleep that is past dreaming, which was very odd because, you remember, my youngest one had just woken up a short while before. Then, as I laid down for a second time, I heard the voice again, only it seemed to come from all the way around me and in a constant stream. "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy," and it wouldn't stop. It just kind of kept reverberating around my head and seemed to have no specific point of origin. My husband got up, not hearing a thing, mind you, to relieve himself, and came back a few moments later. While he was gone, I said out loud, "Whoever you are, go away. We're trying to sleep." And the voice kind of faded away, but always saying "Mommy." I'd asked my husband if he'd heard or seen anything outside the tent when he was out there, but he said he hadn't. This gave me the creeps in a serious way. The voice didn't come back, and we were leaving the next morning anyway. That was yesterday. I told everyone about the voice the next morning, and they looked at me as if I had lobsters crawling out of my ears. But I still wonder if something happened at the campsite. I feel it was a small child who had gotten lost and never found its way back to its tent, and I feel it was a small boy, but I know nothing for certain. If anybody knows about any ghostly happenings at the beachside campgrounds in Oregon State, I'd surely like to hear back from you. I'm not quite sure where to start this story, but I'll try it this way. I'm able to feel the energy around me. I've always felt weird things, but for the last 10 years of my life, my abilities have increased. I was standing in the garage in the daytime, getting ready to leave for work. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man in a black and white suit. He was very tall, about 6'2", and his clothes were old-fashioned. He reminded me of an old Western mortician. His hat was a black hat. I blinked my eyes to see if he would go away, but he just stood there. He reminded me of death. His form was solid, but yet not really. He was not transparent like the others I had seen. I put my purse in the car, and when I looked back, he was gone. I didn't get too close to him because I was terrified. But when I went to my Tai Chi class, I asked my Saifu about him. He asked, "Did you ask him what he wanted?" I said no, because I thought he was death. I was not about to invite death into my house. A few months went by, and I was in the kitchen doing the dishes when a shadow went by the window. I thought it was Ted from next door for a moment, because he is tall. I thought I would greet him at the front door. Well, there was no one there, so I said out loud, "Very funny." The next day, I was in the garage going to work. Again, the man in the driveway. This time, I was sort of brave and stepped closer. I could not feel anything from him except a low vibration on the cool side. It was so weird, so I said, "How can I help you?" He just tipped his hat and then disappeared. When I went home for vacation, I'm from Indiana. My sister and I were going through my aunt's pictures. She has since passed away. She was 85. I came across this picture. All the hair on my neck stood up, and I got the willies. My sister looked at me and said, "Oh, is that your great-great-grandfather McNeely? He was a Quaker and he shoed horses. Since I have found out who he has never come back." I was wondering, since he was solid, so to speak, could he have been out of place in time, more than appearing as a ghost? Thanks for letting me share this story. My friends think I'm weird. I see and sense stuff. There's no way you can convince people of what you see. I don't even try anymore. When I see the ghost in the casino, for example, I just smile and keep on walking. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. Hi, this is a great site. I'd like to share my experiences of the paranormal with you. I've written them in before, and someone wrote back, telling me that it was possible that there could be explanation for what occurred. Right now I'm 18, but I remember the events as if they happened yesterday. I've only ever had to move house once, which was nearly 2 years ago. My parents and I used to live in East Anglia, UK, which has its fair share of haunted old homes, but all that is totally unrelated. We had a semi-detached house. My dad told me I was about 30 years old. I always remember the evil presence in the house, although I didn't notice it much back then. First experience I had was when I was about 6, and it was late one night, after my parents had gone to sleep. Our neighbors were away on holiday at the time. I had the smallest room, which was situated above the garage and the stairwell. I was just falling asleep when I heard a loud knocking noise, like someone rapping against a wall, and it was a rhythmic rapping. I ignored it, or at least tried to at first, but then a few seconds later, I heard it again. It was coming from downstairs, and every time it happened, it seemed to be moving up the stairs and eventually onto the landing. By this time, I was creeped out and turned my lamp on, which flickered weirdly. Eventually, the knocking was right inside my room, in the far corner, and I was surprised my mom or dad didn't hear it. I called out a few times for my mom, because I was too scared to get out of bed, and she came in. I asked her to stay with me and hear the noise for herself. She waited with me and heard it too, but naturally, she didn't believe me and told me it was probably the heating. Why would the heating make noises, which sounded as though they were coming from downstairs, into my room? Another incident happened just after one of my brothers left for university. He was the last one to go. I was about 10 when this happened, and I'd swapped rooms with him anyway, so I was now in the back room and was a lot bigger than the one I had before. This incident terrified me the most, and I'll never forget it. I used to sleep with my feet out, the blanket at the bottom of the bed, obviously, and I woke up after feeling cold fingers on my foot. Waking up groggily, I looked down to the end of my bed and was surprised to see a black shadow in the shape of a human figure. It was looking right my way. I could tell it didn't have any eyes or any human features, and eventually it turned swiftly and quietly left the room. My bedroom door had been shut, and it left my room without the door opening. You can understand now why I sleep with the covers right over my feet. I've had plenty more freaky experiences. They happen on school trips, and on 2 occasions, we stayed in very old, possibly haunted locations. I'll write them in another time. All that I've told you now is all very true. I wish I had looked into the history of our previous house, and I know before it was built, there was just old farmland. And other times, especially when I was alone, I got the feeling I wasn't exactly all alone, if you get what I mean. The presence didn't seem very friendly in itself. This happened about 4 years ago, while I was a senior in high school. A bunch of friends and I were looking for something to do, and ended up riding out to a very old cemetery in the rural area of our small town. The story goes that there was a young boy who was buried there decades ago, and he has often been seen playing on the grounds. We, being arrogant kids, did not believe a word of it and just parked the car at the cemetery and stood around talking. Pretty soon, the five of us started to wander from tombstone to tombstone, reading the names of those buried. I walked over to one that was under a small tree. I was busy reading it, and someone walked up beside me. I was sure it was my cousin, and did not even look at him. I just said, "Did you see this one, Robbie?" Just then, my cousin Robbie said, "Are you talking to me?" He was standing several yards away at the parked car. I could tell in my peripheral vision that the figure on my left was still there. I did not look at it. I ran screaming to the car, where my friends waited. I spooked them so badly that they all just jumped in the car and we sped away. I heard later that the tombstone under the tree belonged to the boy who is said to still haunt the cemetery. I may still be somewhat of a skeptic, but I will never, ever go back there. In May of '99, my favorite uncle, Brian, died of cancer. It was a big surprise. He had always seemed to be so fit and healthy for his age. He was 61. The day he died was strange for me. I'd gone down to his house to see him and found his sister, my Auntie Ann, standing at the door of his house, talking to one of his neighbors. My mom looked worried. She had a right to. That morning, he had been taken to Worksome Hospital in North Wales, UK. He had been complaining that he had a pain in his back for months. Anyway, I didn't know what was going on until I walked closer to my mom and her sister, talking about what happened to my Uncle Brian. It was then when I could smell it. The terrible smell of death looming over the house. I've read and heard of people smelling when death is coming and had never believed it before, but I knew now that it was true. We visited the hospital, and I sat watching my limp, pale uncle's body disintegrate into nothing. And that was a very sad day for me, and will always be embedded into my mind. As we all sat around his bed, my mother asked me what I wanted to do. In my heart of hearts, I wanted to stay by his side, but couldn't bring myself to watch him go. I decided to go home. As we arrived home, and I put my key in the front door, I could smell a faint smell of something. I knew that it was the same smell I had smelled in Uncle Brian's. At that moment, I burst into tears. Just as I did, the telephone rang. It was Brian's son, Mike. Before anyone picked up the phone, I told him that he had died. Mom picked up the phone, and sure enough, my favorite uncle had died minutes before we entered our own house. That is no ghost story, but this is. My Uncle Brian used to stay with us all the time for the holidays, Christmas and Easter, and sometimes birthdays. We had a dartboard put up under my room in the dining room, especially for him. At night, when he was alive, we, or rather I, could hear the darts hitting the board with such force that he used to run right through the floor of my room. He used to stay up till late at night too, watching the telly and switching channels on cable TV. After he died, however, that all stopped. Christmas was as quiet as a mouse. There was no telly, no darts hitting the wall or the dartboard, nothing, just complete silence. That was until New Year. As soon as it turned 2000, the noises started again. One night, I couldn't sleep and thought I heard someone moving about downstairs. I thought it was my dad, who suffered 7 heart attacks. I walked over to my door and opened it a little to listen to what was going on down there. As I listened, I felt a chill run up and down my spine. I could hear the telly. I felt curious, so I made my way down the stairs. As I got to the living room, I found myself staring at a telly that wasn't even on, that hadn't been on for hours. I shrugged and told myself that it was probably next door. but as I reached the top of the stairs, I heard what I thought was someone playing darts. I turned on my heel and walked downstairs, again curious to find out who was making these noises. I got to the games room and looked at the darts board. Its doors were closed and locked. No one could have played with that if they wanted to, without whacking my father up for the key first. For the record, my uncle loved his tea. His cup was still hanging up on the mug tree. As I had gone back upstairs for the second time, I had seen it with my own eyes, hanging there, still and alone. I got to my room and went to sleep, finally. But I had only been asleep about 15 minutes when my older sister, Rebecca, was waking me up. She looked terrified. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me the following creepy tale. She was in her room, laying in her bed, ready to fall asleep, when she just happened to look at the bottom of her bed. That's when she saw him. My Uncle Brian stood there in all his glory. He was holding his mug in his right hand and was staring at her. She couldn't move a muscle. It took her all her time to make it out of her room to my room. By this time, she was crying her eyes out. I don't know what it was that made me do the thing I did next, but I felt I had to check that this mug was still hanging up on the mug tree like it was about 25 minutes ago. With my sister holding onto my hand so tight, we made it to the kitchen. His mug was not there. I went into the living room and found a still warm cup sitting on the table, half full of steaming tea. To this day, he still plays darts and visits my sister's room. Maybe he wasn't meant to leave us as soon as he did. Back in 1990, I was 18 years old and staying with a host family in Veracruz, Mexico, as an exchange student. One day, I awoke to a lot of bustling and nervous chatter around the household. I kept hearing the word Baruja repeated over and over. Unfamiliar with that word, I inquired about its meaning, which was explained to mean witchcraft in Spanish. Apparently, someone found a cross, laid down in granulated salt in the backyard, which according to the native residents was a clear sign of witchcraft. Being the consummate skeptic, I just nodded and secretly chuckled at the genuine worry that this superstition was creating. Later that evening, the day's excitement culminated into a sort of ghost story session in the kitchen area, where it was explained to me that witches and spirits have been known to travel in shadows or balls of light. Whatever happened to the broomstick? I belted as I laughed out loud. After a few more stories, I had heard enough and decided to show them just what I thought of their primitive beliefs. I ran out the back door and approached the cross of salt that started this whole charade as the group clamored after me. I stood above the cross and made a challenge. I said out loud, I challenge the spirits of hell to damn harm me. Anyway, they all thought I was taking a big risk, but I just laughed it off. Later that night, my host brother and I were dropping off friends with the family flatbed. As the last one jumped out from the rear, I turned my head and watched him enter his household. Before I turned my head back to a frontal view, the next image we saw both startled the both of us. Materializing from the upper window, there seemed to be an entity of some sort. It was an old lady, but a really disfigured looking old lady. You could see the detail in her face, but she had red glowing eyes at the same time. Besides the red glowing eyes, she had scars all over her face, and it looked like she was almost on fire at the same time. I don't even know how to describe it, but it looked very off-putting. The image of this witch lasted about 30 seconds before she dematerialized, and she was no more. Naturally, we bailed out of that area without really processing what we had seen. After what I just witnessed, I knew I felt a sense of regret. It was then when I realized that I should never make demands or challenge Satan himself to come see me. So, I'm not sure entirely if that was Satan himself coming to see me, but I know that it was something serious, and I didn't want to mess with it. Demonic. Challenging the spirits to come see me. I guess that was a horrible idea. And now I'm no longer a skeptic. I'm a little bit more open-minded now. But I guess you can understand, after dealing with that kind of thing. So what's the big takeaway from here? Obviously, you don't want to challenge the devil. You don't want to summon anyone, because you never know what you may be conjuring up. I know this all sounds silly, but it's true. It happened, and I just wanted to tell my story. And if you like today's stories, please comment in the section below that you love the stories and you want pie to go along with your stories that you wanted to listen to. I don't know, guys, but thank you so much for letting me be your narrator. It's been a great night tonight. Actually, I've been working all day on this video, and I just wanted to say thank you so much again, for tuning in and being the best audience that you can possibly be. Clap it up, everybody. Clap it up. Subscribe it up. Subscribe it up. Comment it up. Comment it up. Shut up, Phantom. Shut up, Phantom. Go to sleep, Phantom. It's too late for you, Phantom. Stop talking, Phantom. Stop talking, Phantom. No, he won't. No, he won't. Yes, he will. Yes, he will. Okay, yeah, it's definitely time to go. You know, if I'm acting crazy like that, then I have to go. But it's a catchy song. I just made up a, weird song that, I mean, hopefully it would be played on the radio and, like, it become mainstream and, people make an auto-tune song out of that. Auto-tune song? I don't even know. Anyway, guys, Kiki, you won't leave me, because you'll never ever love me. Right beside me. Okay, I gotta go. Bye-bye.